Welcome back. In today's episode, Michelle and I are excited to speak with Dan Olsen. Dan is a product management trainer, consultant, speaker, and author of the book, The Lean Product Playbook, which we'll be chatting about today. So let's dive in. How you doing, Dan?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Matt.
Pleasure to have you. Hello, Michelle.
Hey, Matt. Hey, Dan. I'm really excited to have you on the show today, mainly because I've been following your book for a long time now, your book and you for a long time now. You just reminded me because I couldn't really remember how long I had the book and when did I read it. You reminded me that you published it 8 years ago. So I guess I got it 8 years ago because I have it forever, or at least it seems forever. In product management, I guess 8 years is a very long time.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thanks for inviting me to be on the show.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's great to have you. And it's really cool to speak about books. We talked with Ben Yokovitz about lean analytics a while back here. And so excited to hear and how that's applied to product management.
Let's dive in. First, tell us a bit about yourself before we get into the book.
Sure.
Tell us about who is Dan Olsen and how did you get into product management?
Yeah. My name's Dan Olsen. I mainly spend my time these days training product teams, right? So whether it's private training workshops for companies or public training workshops, either at conferences or I do my own as well. I'm industry. I'm so excited. This year, 2023, all the product events and conferences are coming back in full force in person. So I'm excited. We've been doing it virtually with COVID. So I'll be out in Ohio for industry, which is one of my favorite conferences. I'll be out teaching workshops. So if anyone's going, I'm teaching 2 half-day workshops there, public. And then also Mind the Product London in October. October is always a popular month for all the conferences. There's like 4 or 5 different conferences in October. And I'll be doing a workshop there. So that's an example of my public workshops. I also give talks. One thing that's really exciting is as PM has just kind of really exploded in the last 4 or 5 years, more and more companies are starting to organize like a product day or like 2 or 3 a year, right? Or the aggressive ones are doing it once a quarter, which is great. But even when you go from no product day to, hey, let's get all the product people together for one day, they often bring in external speakers like me. So I love contributing to those. So I've been doing a lot of those as well. So that's how I mainly spend my time, is speaking, whether it's talks at these events, private or public events, or training workshops. I also run a meetup that I've been running for 9.5 years now, called Lean Product Meetup. Because, when I was coming up in product management, there just weren't a lot of resources, there weren't a lot of community things where you could share and compare notes. So I started that here in the Silicon Valley where I live. Each month, bring in a top speaker, and I've grown that community. With COVID, we took it virtual. We actually saw a big increase in growth because now you didn't have to live within an hour of Silicon Valley to go to the event. And we just crossed over 12,000 members. So I'm excited about that. We're actually finally just now bringing it back in person in September, but we're going to keep it streaming for all the people that are remote around the world. So that'll be exciting. Yeah. And then, I put my talks and the talks from the meetup on YouTube. So I have a YouTube channel. It's just youtube.com/Dan Olsen. That's got over 16,000 subscribers now. So, and then on top of that, I'll do some consulting and advising and coaching here and there of select people. And then the other thing that I do, it's coming up, is I co-organize an event for product leaders called Product Leaders Summit. So this is kind of a special curated event, invite only. Used to be in person again, took it virtual, and now this October we're back in person again. So that's what I do. The common thread is just trying to like up level product teams and product orgs through all those activities that I do, and the book, of course, as well.
Yes, and that's really great because we know how important it is to learn from other people's experience. And it's very, product management, it's a hard thing. It's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to learn. And without that hands-on experience, but also learning from other people's experience, it's almost impossible to actually learn how to do it. So what was your experience before you became, what you do today, before you did the training and you got into this for full-time? It seems like that's your full-time job. But before that, I'm sure you built some products and you were able to learn it on your own.
Yeah, no, it's totally true. I mean, it's tough. It's a tough job. It's a great job, but it's a tough job to learn because, you can't really like get a degree in it, right? I think Carnegie Mellon has a master's degree, and there's things, that's why things like product school have emerged. But even then, there's like, it's just like anything else. It's like you learn, like take computer science in school. You're going to learn Java and C and how to do generic algorithms. And then you're going to go to a company, they're going to want you to do Python and JavaScript. It's like, okay, right. So there's like the book learning, but then there's the applied experiential learning. And I feel like PM especially, you need that experiential learning. You know, it's just invaluable. Of course, you should read books and watch and read blog posts and go to conferences and hear speakers and look at videos. But then you need to kind of internalize that and try to apply it. And so it's definitely like that. So for me, my path, I mean, there's a lot of different paths to product management. You know, I started a while ago before it was as popular as it is today. Mm-hmm. So back in the day, basically my path to it was through business school. So before business school, I was an electrical engineering major. You know, I've been coding since I was a kid. So I was very comfortable with computers and coding and things like that, electrical engineering major. And then my job out of college was actually in the Navy doing nuclear submarine design, which was actually more mechanical engineering. They trained us in like mechanical and nuclear engineering. And then after doing that for 5 years, I knew I wanted to get an MBA. And that's what brought me out to Silicon Valley, go to business school at Stanford, you know, and then luckily, you know, companies come on campus to recruit people, you know, from grad school. And so at the time, in hindsight, really the only this was like in the late 90s, right? .com boom. The only companies that really had official product managers, like Intuit, which is where I ended up working, right? I never heard of Intuit before, but they came to the school and said, hey, we're Intuit. And the more I learned about it, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like, these product managers I'm meeting, it seems like their job is great. It seems like they're really empowered. It seems like they're very customer centric at Intuit. You know, Microsoft had they were called program managers back then, but they were another strong company. And then Yahoo started to they called them producers, but it was a similar kind of thing, right? So back then, if those were kind of, not to rule out any other options, those were the three main options if you wanted to break into product management. So luckily for me, they came on campus and I was able to get a job at Intuit. And then I got thrown into basically a machine, because Intuit's been around since the DOS days, right? There are very few products that have companies and products that have been so successful for so long that they go that far back. Think of like Photoshop, right? Microsoft Word, all those kind of things. Intuit Quicken goes back to DOS days too. There are very few things like that. So I kind of walked into a machine where they're like putting out a new version every year, you know, kind of like Word would do every year. And so they kind of had it down to a science where you come in, okay, here's what we do. Now we do a kickoff, we do our research. Now we do a kickoff. Now we form our feature teams. Now you guys define requirements. Then we do design. Then we do testing, and then debugging. Then we do beta, right? So it was great learning, you know, and a 1-year product cycle was awesome because you weren't going, you know, it wasn't like we're shipping every week or 2 weeks. So it wasn't like a hamster wheel that was going super fast. You had time to kind of think about each stage. And then after I did the one product cycle, then I got promoted and I was in charge of the next one. So then I was like, okay, cool. This time I have some thoughts on how we can do the research better and how we can do things better, you know? And so it was so a lot of what the foundations of what I learned in product management, I learned from there. That being said, in hindsight, my job in the Navy doing highly technical submarine design was actually very akin to product management because we were working on a very complex product with a lot of interdependencies. And you had to basically work in a matrix organization with all these other people. And it's probably the most, you know, we all have to work in a matrix, or everything's matrix, right? There's always some dash lines or dotted lines. It's probably the most efficient matrix I've ever seen in hindsight now. I'm like, oh my gosh, like we all knew what we were doing. We knew we had a common mission. We all knew the ways of working. There was no divergence on mission or ways of working or culture. It had been, again, it was a place that had been around for a long time. So their culture and decision-making processes were kind of set in stone, and you just walked into a machine and you absorbed it like a sponge. So so that's kind of my training. And then I also picked up, while I was doing that, a master's in industrial engineering at night, which I feel like I picked up some good skills from that as well, like statistics and operations research and things that kind of come in handy as well.
That sounds really interesting and cool, mainly also because the way you describe it, it feels like some companies, even these days, don't really know how to do it. And this knowledge was already there so many years ago.
Agreed.
How come they don't know how to do it? But
it's crazy. You know, I've talked about this because like me, Marty Kagan's a friend of mine, and we speak at a lot of events. I host him on my meetup, and we were like just having a coffee one day, and I'm like, we're talking about, you know, and this question comes up a lot. To say, despite all these books, it's not for a lack of books or videos or conferences out there. how can there still be companies where it feels like the PMs are banging rocks together and like the 3 Sigma companies are like light years ahead? How can that be? And so we got into a great discussion about, I'm again, back to the statistics and probability, what's the distribution of skill of PM? Like it's a bell curve, obviously, right? And the question is like, how is that bell curve changing over time? Right? You would think it'd be like moving to the right as everybody got stronger or better.
Yep.
And my opinion was, well, maybe it's slightly moving to the right. Marty's opinion was like, well, I think it's actually moving to the left. It's going down because of things like PO roles causing confusion and agile and all this. So and one of my basic observations is, well, look, here's the thing: it's growing, and so you have all these new people getting into PM who have no background, who know they're just thrown in, and so they're dragging the bell curve down a little bit, even though everyone, so, and I do think it's trending to the right. I do think on average it's getting bigger. It's the mean is increasing, if we want to say that, over time. And I do think like hopefully the head is stretching out. The bottom line, and when you think about that visualization, is there are companies operating at the 3 Sigma level that are just, obviously they're crushing their competition. If they're at that level and everyone else is down here, then they're going to be crushing their competition, right?
Yeah. It's nice to be optimistic about it, and I would imagine that Marty Kagan will say a bit more on the pessimistic end of things. But from where I'm sitting and where I'm looking at things, usually what I will look is like how many people are talking in a certain way on LinkedIn about it. So looking at the social media and all the people that are talking and all the chatter and chat, and then also how many job positions are talking for product management, are mentioning the right words. Yes.
Yeah.
And I do see a shift to the right, but so I'm a bit more with you on that.
Yes.
But I think it's very, very, very slow. It's like the slowest turtles out there.
The role's very abstract sometimes if you think about it.
Yes.
If you think about it, a job as an accountant, the accounting role has been the same way forever.
Oh, I know.
Being a PM is so whatever the business defines it as. So job description is a perfect example.
And that made me
I used to, back in the early days of PM, there were all these blog posts: should PM report into engineering or marketing? So I'm glad we're past that part, but still to your point, Matt, and I used to always have a slide. I used to have a slide back in the day. It's like a product manager by any other name, like a Rose by any other name. Cause it's like sometimes they're called product marketing managers, they're program managers, and so there's title variants. That's kind of normalized a little bit, although you get ambiguity with product owners and other stuff. But to your point, even if the title is product manager, what that means, what the job responsibilities are, can vary significantly from company to company, right?
Yep.
And you see, and that's, but that's the thing about, in hindsight, about Intuit is like, one question you can ask is how empowered are product managers in that org, right? Orgs, sometimes engineering is the most empowered. And the way to kind of think about it is, okay, when we have a disagreement, who gets to break the tie, right? Yeah. When we thumb wrestle, who kind of breaks the tie? And it's like, well, if engineering gets on the margin, gets their way, then it's kind of more engineering centric. A lot of enterprise B2B companies can be sales centric, or sales running the show. Sales is telling product and engineering what to build. And you're just downstream. You're like we call it short order chef. You're just taking orders and just, delivering it to the dev kitchen, and you're not adding a lot of value. So, versus in places where there's more empowerment, more of a balance between the critical functions. So that's an important thing, I think, to think about, that does influence what does the job actually look like. The other thing that influences is staffing ratios, right? That's the number one thing. I hate to simplify things too much, but when I go in and audit a company and they want to up-level their stuff, when you've got 4 or 5 engineers per PM, that's manageable. That's great. The PM, it's still a busy job, but they have the opportunity to kind of interact with them all, have time to do a little customer research, have time to do this, have time to, do that. When it's like 15 engineers to 1 PM or 20, they are just at wit's end, just keeping the Jira Agile factory going, right? That's what ends up happening. That's how you get a feature factory. If your PMs are so busy that they're down in the weeds, living in Jira, only going to Agile ceremonies, so delivery focused, then they are they have so little time on the discovery part of their job. That's what happens a lot, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I think we could have talked for days just about these topics, but let's dive a bit into the book because that's what we're here for. So you wrote the book, the Lean Product Playbook, and you mentioned it was released about 8 years ago. What is the book about? Tell us a bit,
So the book came out in 2015. It is basically the distillation of everything I had learned in my product career up to that point. In 2014, when I wrote it, got published in 15. And so let me tell you about, I only told you what I did through Intuit. So I was at Intuit for a while. I got promoted. It was great. I love my time at Intuit. After a while, though, I realized as much as I've learned here, I think I've kind of like, I could feel the learning start to flatten out, the learning curve flatten out a little bit. I'm like, yeah, I could switch to another product at Intuit. But, it's like, I know what, and my goal was always, hey, let's go. My general plan was go to an established company, learn best practices, and then go apply that at startups, right? Do a startup, right? And so I went and worked at a few startups, and then something serendipitous happened. I mentioned I coded when I was a kid, right? And I was a double E. So I knew like basic and some assembly and like Pascal, like nothing you would actually use.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2005, after doing the startup, I was like, you know what? I'm a technical guy. I know how to code. I just don't know how to code this web stuff. I don't know each. So I literally said, I'm going to invest. And I went to City College of San Francisco. Best deal ever. I think it was like $80 a class. It was like, a mile from my house in the city. And I just geeked out and I was like, okay, I'm going to take HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Apache, Unix, Photoshop, like MySQL, like all that stuff. And then I got a job offer as a VP of product at a startup, and I really liked the team, but I'm like, hey guys, like I want to join you, but I can't go full time because I just got to power through these classes. And so that's how I stumbled being this like interim VP of product or head of CPO for startups. And so I did that for that startup, and it was great. And then I did it for more startups. I did it for Box in 2007, actually, like right after their Series A. It was awesome to be on the front lines of Box. Those guys, the 4 co-founders were not even 21. I went to their 21st birthday. My wife was doing her residency in med school, so I was hanging out with those guys in Palo Alto,
amazing
stuff. It was awesome, right? So my point is I got to see a lot of different startups as the acting CPO, interim CPO. So, and I didn't expect this, but as a result, instead of working in one company, only seeing one data set, I got to see all these different data sets. Okay, this company's trying this company's trying that. What's working, what's not? Which tools are they using? How are they making their decisions? What processes they're using, right? And after working on so many of those, and then the other thing that happened is I got invited to start speaking in 2006. So I spoke at Stanford. I spoke at the Web 2.0 Expo conference, right? There were no product management conferences back then. It was like tech conferences, right? And I was speaking at those. And it was the first time I ever put my slides together. I look back on the first slides I make, they look like junk right now. I'm like, oh my gosh. But the core frameworks, a lot of the core frameworks go back to 2006, the first time I had to create slides. And then I would talk to a group of PMs and they would ask me questions. Yeah, what about this? What about this? So I'd go back and create some more slides to answer those questions. And so like the slide where just grew and grew, the talk grew and grew. So between the questions I got from PMs and the hands-on consulting I was doing with all these companies, I started like, realizing, oh man, like there's some like meta pattern here. Like why do some products succeed and why do some fail, right? And with Lean Startup, the concept of product market fit became popular again. I think that's a great way to talk about the core thing. And for me, the top reason most products, you hear these statistics, 80% of products fail, 90% of new products fail. The number one reason is they don't have product market fit. It's not execution. It's not lack of funding. It's just they didn't have product market fit, which means they didn't solve a real customer problem in a way that was better than whatever was out there, right? And so that was kind of my philosophical mindset, which again was kind of weird, but it's consistent with kind of where I worked on submarines, where you always make sure you understand the problem or the objectives before you do a solution, right? When you design a nuclear submarine, you got to get it right. So there's a lot of time spent on objectives, requirements, constraints, before you go, hey, let's just do this. Let's build this. Oh, that one's sorry, sub 1.0.
Oh, it's
MVP sunk. Sorry, let's pivot to 2.0, right? You can't do that, right? Yeah. So it's kind of funny. So anyway, and then the one thing, there was one time I was teaching a class at I was teaching a workshop, and I had a particularly sharp, curious, inquisitive group of people, and they're like, well, tell us the sequence. What should you do first? And then what? And then what? And so I remember being on the whiteboard, like, okay, first you need to identify your target customer, and then you need to like define the need. And I was like running out of room all over the whiteboard. That's the first time I was like, I can actually create a framework or process Now, obviously the details are different based on what market you're going after and what startup you're doing or company you're doing, but at a meta level. So the long answer to your question is, at a meta level, the book is basically how do you significantly increase your odds of achieving product market fit when you have a new product idea or a new feature idea? Yeah. Because, and it basically, and it kind of goes with the lean startup stuff of like, well, what are the hypotheses you're making? It's basically focused on hypothesis, getting really clear instead of just assuming you're right. Hey, we think this is the target market. We think this is the underserved problems we're going to address. We think this value prop will be a better value prop than what's in the marketplace. We think we should go out with this feature set. We think this will be a good UX design for it. Those are the 5 things. And so basically there's a pyramid because there's hierarchy between them, and 2 of them, the bottom 2 are the market, the top 3 are the product. So in a way, I kind of like created an official definition of product market fit. Before my book, people talked about it, but they talked about it very simplistically, like, oh yeah, Box succeeded because they had product market fit. Startup X, sadly, they failed because they did not have product market fit. People talk about it very simplistically, but no one really had a model, you know. And one of my fellow product felt leaders like, wow, it sounds like you're trying to like build a recipe for how to build successful products. I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what it is, because I've had that data set, right? So that's the idea, is going through that. And it's great to see the feedback on Amazon. It's got good ratings and people saying, gosh, this is spot on. I wish I knew this before I did this other product startup that I did. Now this time I'm going to follow it. You know, there's no guarantees in life, but it significantly increases your odds by being rigorous about what is our hypothesis on these 5 key things.
Yeah,
right.
And that's really cool. I can tell you that when I first read the book, it was after I read Inspired.
Yep.
And you mentioned Marty Kagan, and I probably mentioned a few times in this podcast before, Marty Kagan, like being the guru of product management.
Yeah.
So sorry I didn't mention you as guru of the product management as well, but there is always one guru, I guess. But the one thing that struck me back then was that Marty Kagan speak more about the theory of product management and the environment and ecosystem of product management, where you spoke more, in Hebrew we say tachles, where it is, you might know the word from some...
No, but I like it. I like where you're going. I don't know what it is. That's great.
But tachles in Hebrew basically means like to the point. I mean, give me something that I can use to the point.
Tangible.
Tangible, rather than finding my way through them. So that's what I liked about your book when I read it the first time. I remember.
And our books are like, I mean, honestly, Inspired and my book are like 2 of the most popular. But when people, like, if you like kind of consolidate it, and I think it's because they complement each other like that. Marty's book is awesome. It's, you know, when I was coming up in product management, there weren't that many books available, so I read the original Inspired edition. There's a 2nd edition now, and to your point, it's philosophical and it's about principles, right? It's more philosophy and principles, which is very important to understand. There you go. Yeah. And to my point, you know, basically in my book, I love that that if you look at the reviews, you get things like tangible, pragmatic, applied, practical. Like that's what I want. Like my goal, and this is kind of like when I pick speakers as well for my meetup, I'm very picky because I'm like, yeah, we can get exec from big company XYZ. What are they actually going to teach the product people in the audience that they can, right after their talk, go and apply those tools or frameworks or techniques? I don't want some nice story about here's what we did and it's a nice, like, what am I taking away that I can actually do that I can apply? And so that's the thing. And so that's why, you know, my book has over 50 figures and tables in it. I'm very much visual frameworks that are really easy to use, like 1-page visual frameworks that just help you clarify your thinking and make better product decisions. There's multiple of those throughout. And so once I created the pyramid, I realized I can just guide, it's a process. I can guide people through the 6 steps of this process. So it's a process. So it tells you what to do. It's like step 1, who's your target customer? Step 2, what are their needs? Step 3, you know, kind of 2.5, let's do an underserved, overserved analysis on their needs. Step 3, what's your value prop? How are you going to be better or different using the Kano model, right? Step 5, what's your feature set? Step 5, let's UX design it. Step 6, test it. So it's prescriptive in that sense. Like, so it tells you what to do. It's interesting, you know, design thinking is something that people are interested in and are curious, but it's not as prescriptive. It's just like, hey, here's 6 steps. It's just, you know, so every once in a while are jobs to be done. You get these things that have some good ideas, but someone can't just follow the steps. Like they'll jump in and follow the steps. Or sometimes you can be too prescriptive. Like maybe some on Scrum, it's like, hey, you have to comply with this exactly, or else you are doing it wrong and you're going to go to Scrum hell, you know, like that kind of thing. People get very judgy, right? So, you know, mine's a nice, and there's another framework that's got like over 80 steps. It's very rigorous, and I get it, but it's very consistent with mine. It's like, well, mine's 6 steps. Like, so, and again, that's why also I love it. Engineers like it because it's very logical. Like, I'm an ex-engineer, right? So it's like logical. It's like, yeah, this, and it's anyway. So I appreciate that feedback, and I do think they're complementary books, and yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, I think that's interesting when you're talking about getting the bell curve to go to the right. Like if you have a new product team or a new leader on the team, like implementing something tangible and something people can grasp visually, and especially if you have younger members on your team, you can implement that as opposed to being more abstract. I think it can be a really good conceptual. Yeah. So I think being able to apply something tangible to a new team or a new leader is a great way to go.
Yeah. And that's the cool thing about, all these things, if you look at some of my older talks, there were earlier crude versions of this. I didn't actually create the pyramid in the process till I sat down to write the book, and I was trying to like piece it together and boil it down to what's the essence. At one point there was like 7 steps. I'm like, wait, but these 2 steps are kind of conflated. And so it was super cool that there's a book called Deep Work that I like a lot. So when I felt like I had a chance to do deep work by just going and shutting myself off and trying to sort this out and like thinking through the examples that the framework that makes sense for people.
Yeah. Now, even with the simplified process of 6 steps, it's still, it's a whole book. There's a lot going on in there. And I would, recommend people maybe to start with one thing and then expand. And so rather than try to implement everything at once.
Right.
If they go that route, what would be the one thing that you think people should start with?
There's 2 things. So just to take a step back. So the book is the Lean Product Playbook. I divided it into 3 sections. Section 1 is core concepts, which includes the product market fit pyramid, explaining the 5 hypotheses of the product market fit pyramid, explaining the 6 steps of the lean product process. Basically, all you do is there's a 6-step. Once you have a UX prototype, you have a loop that goes back to the bottom to test it with customers. And then the other key idea is problem space versus solution space. Then in part 2, I spent a chapter on each of the 6 steps. I also added a chapter on UX design because it's very, very important. I learned it like right away into it. I'm like, gosh, like a good PM, I was like, okay, the last PRD was 50 pages. I'm going to make mine 60 pages. Like back then, right? It was like, I'm going to be even more detailed. I'm going to think about more corner cases. I'm going to do more research. I'm going to spec it out even more. That's kind of what staying in your lane of like what you can do. But then we got later in the design phase. I'm like, oh my gosh, I could do the best job on the requirements, but if we don't do a good job on UX design, right? So that for that reason, I inserted a chapter just on, obviously there are books on UX design, but my top tips and advice on UX design. And then a case study where I actually showed the lean product process being applied. And then section 3 is, okay, cool. Once you validated your idea, a chapter on Agile. Now we need to build it. How do we build it in an Agile manner, right? Obviously there are books on Agile, but I wanted this to be comprehensive. One of my goals, it's like 340 pages, right? So it covers, well, if you have an idea, how to formulate it, how to test it, validate, all the steps of the pyramid. Then it's like, okay, Agile, and then 2 chapters on analytics, because post-launch, you're going to use analytics and optimize your product, right? So that's kind of the overall thing. But back to your question, and I like to couch it back in, depending on the survey you see, 80% of new products fail, 90% of new products fail. If I do kind of a root cause analysis based on all the data I've seen with all the companies I've worked, there are 2 main reasons why. So if you just do these 2 things, and they're easy to do, once you have the awareness, they're easy to do, you can increase your odds significantly. The first is, don't jump to solutions. Don't just start building something, right? So I spend a lot of time, I think I'm one of the first people to talk about the difference between problem space and solution space, which I learned from where I worked in the Navy as well as Intuit. I'm so glad to hear more and more people talking about problem space these days. It makes me very happy because we have a bias, product teams have a bias to just start designing and building stuff. And when you design something, you're starting in the solution space. And when you build something, you're in the solution space. So the real question is, okay, what customer problem is that going to solve? And so this is like this learned awareness. Like we live in the solution space. I know why we live in the solution space. Like that's what we live in. And it's like the quickest path to getting something done. I'm actually listening to a great book right now. It talks about thinking versus doing. We have such a doing bias, right? Such a doing bias. So it's like, oh yeah, let's build this widget. Let's go. Yeah, I got it. Here's the design. Let's go. Yeah. And it's like ready. It's ready. It's like ready, fire, aim. Like, how do you even know, right? If you didn't even talk to any customers, your odds, it's like throwing spaghetti against the wall. The odds of hitting the bullseye are like nothing. You have nothing, right? So that's the first thing is start in the problem space. before you jump to solutions. And this is a learned thing that again, developers, they have to ship code in the solution space. So it's natural for them to be solution space focused. Designers have to do what? They have to design designs, pixels, mockups in the solution space. So who's uniquely in the position to bring the problem space mindset to the team? It's the PM, right? If all you're doing is living in Jira and, like reviewing mockups and reviewing code, you're all in the solution space, right? Like, what are you doing as far as discovery and definition, right? So, anyway, that's the first thing. Now, the second thing is, great. Once you've identified the problems, say we come up with, hey, there's our target customer. We came up with like 15 potential problems that we think they have that we might be able to address for them. How do you prioritize which ones are bigger opportunities and which ones are not good opportunities? That's where my importance versus satisfaction framework comes in, that I developed it into it. And so all you do is you take your 15 problems, and as I like to say in the book, even with a sample size of 0, with your team, use your gut and use high, medium, low, and place those 15 on a 2x2 of high, medium, low on importance, which is, hey, how important is this problem, right? Imagine, let's take a simplified example, TurboTax. TurboTax, basically, it saves you time on your taxes, it saves you money on your taxes, and it makes you feel better about, like, more confident about your taxes. Let's just say those are the 3 benefit ladders, right? For some people, saving time is the most important thing. For other people, saving money is the most important thing, right? So that's what you want to do, is the importance, right? Now, when you have a consistent target market, the importances should be clustered together, right? If you have a scattergram, it tells me that you don't have a cohesive target market yet. And then the satisfaction is great. However they're doing their taxes today, if it's with H&R Block or some competitor product or by themselves, how satisfied are they with how well that need is getting met, right? And you end up with quadrants. And the bottom 2 quadrants are low importance. You want to avoid those because you can't create customer value by addressing a low importance need. The upper right quadrant is high importance, so that's better, but it's also high satisfaction. That's a competitive market. Yes, it's high importance, but they've already found something that works pretty good for them. You hear people say you need to be 10x better. That's the quadrant where you can't just come in with the Me Too product. You have to be 10x better. And then that leaves the upper left quadrant, which is high importance, low satisfaction. That is the opportunity quadrant. It's like shooting fish in a barrel. It's like they're telling you this is an important need, and they're telling you they don't have a good solution, right? So if you do those 2 things, is you basically say, okay, let's make sure we identify customer problems before we do solutions, and let's run them through Dan's quick 2x2 important satisfaction and try to find something in the upper left quadrant. And if you can do those things and you find something in the upper left quadrant, go after that idea. If you don't have something in the upper left quadrant, go back to the drawing board with our customer and problems until you have something. For me, those 2 simple steps will de-risk and increase your probability of success significantly over the average kind of product effort that happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you. And I've seen it done, and I've done it myself. What do you think about, since you published the book, there was a lot of other books that came out and a lot of other frameworks that came out. And how do you feel that, your specific method compares with others, or like, did you find other things, that other people came up with that might be as useful, or they just maybe talking nonsense?
No, I think what's interesting is, so, like, I come from a more hardcore engineering, physical sciences background. Like, I love physics, right? I did nuclear physics stuff. And in the physical world, except for quantum mechanics, you can pretty much like have an equation that says, okay, if you throw this ball with this velocity at this angle, here's how it's going to go, right? It's very predictive, right? And that's what somebody says. Like, you're trying to what they said is, you're trying to do the scientific method for products. I'm like, yeah, that's basically what I'm trying to do. The problem is there's a lot of probabilistic stuff going on, a lot of uncertainty, what I mean? A lot of noise. Yeah. And so, so back to what you're saying is, I feel like what I find the longer I work here is there's every once in a while, there's another thought leader or multiple thought leaders that have come to the same conclusion. So it's not like black and white like physics is, but it's like, it's gray, but gosh, these 2 or 3 independent people exploring the fog on their own kind of reached the same conclusion, right? So like I say, I've been saying since 2000, publicly since 2006, earlier, before that, problem space, product, customer needs, right? If you look at what Marty says or other people, they also say you should focus on customer problems or needs, right? Like, so that's a common thing that And when you say, it's funny because I hate to say it this way, but when I tell it to product people, when they hear it, a lot of them just kind of nod. They go, that just makes intrinsic sense. Like that makes sense. Like I didn't have to prove it to them with a bunch of, which you can't do. Like, how could I prove it? It's not like a physics theorem that I can prove or a geometry theorem I can prove. It's like, I can just tell you that this is going to increase your odds because I've seen a lot of at-bats, and it just kind of makes intuitive sense, right? So that kind of being customer-centric, making sure you're clear on the problems, right? Making sure you're clear on your target customer. I'm not the only one saying that kind of stuff, right? I do think that, I'm one of the first people to say that kind of stuff, and I have thoughts on how to organize it. The real differentiator is the next thing, which is, okay, once you've identified the 15 customer needs you could solve, what do you do with it? And a lot of other frameworks or processes, they don't have an answer for that. It's just like, figure out which one's the best one. So that's where I have importance and satisfaction, right? Which I developed it into it back in the day because I was wrestling with, okay, we've got all these things we could do. How do I prioritize which one's the best opportunity? And luckily for me, Intuit was founded by Scott Cook, who used to work at a Procter & Gamble, right? So they had, and those guys, imagine you've got to convince customers to buy your toilet paper instead of someone else's. They are very big on market research and differentiation. Like, how is your toilet paper or toothpaste or soap better than another one? They are really good at differentiation and market research. So he brought that to Intuit, and I was on the Quicket team, which was the founding team. And so we had a PhD in market research on my team. I was a sponge. I learned so much from her. Long story short, we had all this amazing data, and I was like using all the data that we had and trying different ways to analyze it. And when I did importance versus satisfaction, that's the one that made the most sense. Now, back to your question, the interesting thing is, like about 3 years later, after I left Intuit, I was at a library and I saw this book, and it's like, What Customers Want. I'm like, oh, that sounds like a cool book. So I grabbed it by Tony Ulwick. I started reading it. I'm, 20, 30 pages in. All of a sudden he's like, yeah, importance versus satisfaction. I'm like, what the heck? What are the odds that, it's like we both independently discovered electricity or something, right? I'm like, what are the odds that this happened, right? And so then I reached out to him, we talked, and his origin story was he worked on the IBM PC Junior. He was an engineer. And just real quick, basically like, IBM was very successful with PCs. They decided they wanted to like launch a more simpler, lower price point PC Junior, it was called. And marketing back in those days, marketing would give the MRD to engineering, or he's kind of throw it over the fence. And so he's like, yeah, we, the engineering team, we're a bunch of smart engineers. We executed on what marketing, the MRD they gave us, we executed perfectly on it. We launched a product and it was a big flop and a big failure and a big PR nightmare. So like a good engineer, he's like, does not compute. We did what marketing told us and we had a huge market failure. What went wrong? And so he went on this path of how does that happen? And how do you really think about customer value? So that's part of it too, is like, I feel like Tony's a peer of mine as far as like, we really think about what does it mean to create customer value? Like, what does that mean? It's very esoteric, right? Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So Jobs to Be Done, his first book, actually his second book, he has an old book. I went and found it. It's an old book called Business Strategy Formulation, but his second book was What Customers Want. It's great, right? So there's a perfect example of like, so he's the only other person besides me that say, hey, once you do the problem space, how do you identify the priorities? And it at a high level, it's consistent. The only difference is the methodology, specific methodology of how we compute opportunity scores is slightly different. It's going to give you the same answers at the end of the day. So that's an example of that. And, people will be like, hey, what about Jobs to Be Done? Jobs to Be Done also says focus on the job to be done. Job is just they didn't use the word problem or need. They decided to come up with a new word so that people would realize it's not the typical thing. It's jobs to be done. But again, jobs to be done, there's not a rigorous methodology. It's like, oh yeah, hey, milkshake. Yeah, people wanted a milkshake. These are like little anecdotes. And, some people are trying to be more. Now, I will say, Tony actually is one of the original. There are a lot of people claiming that, oh yeah, I was in on the early days of jobs to be done. Tony's one of the original people. Now he calls his outcome-driven innovation is his flavor of it. So, and his is very rigorous. His is the one that has those 80 steps. If you look in that book, it's at least 60 steps, right? He's even more of an engineer than me. He's very rigorous, methodical, right? And so, spiritually, philosophically, like my 6 steps and his 80 steps, they're pretty much the same, right? They're consistent. So sorry, what were we going to say?
No, that's I just want to mention I did take one of his workshops, and you're right, there is a lot of steps over there. And maybe because of the steps, it's very hard to go outside of the workshop and start implementing it, because you have to start following all these steps again and again and again.
Agreed.
Where if it's a much smaller number, it doesn't seem so daunting.
Yeah. And it makes sense, because one is he's very thorough and rigorous, right? And I've geeked out with him on, gosh, before you came up with important satisfaction, what other things did you try? We were talking about all this stuff, and, we geeked out on that. There are very few people in the world that I can geek out on that kind of stuff. Tony's one of them, which I love.
Yeah.
And, but he had a consultancy. So that was his thing. His consultancy would come in and do it for a company, and they would do it for really important things like, like heart stents, like, biomedical, like, these companies that have big budgets, big companies, big budgets, where they could afford to pay the money and be very methodical. And first we're going to do a survey, and then we're going to do the quality, we're going to, follow all those steps. I know over time, because he and I have talked, I've hosted him on a meetup several times, one of my favorite speakers to have. I always love having Tony, and we're at same events. I know that over time he's tried to create like a simplified, more streamlined version for people to do it on their own. That's the fundamental thing. Is he shared a high level version in what customers want. In the jobs to be done book you have there, he actually shares all the details of it. And I think, to your point, it's kind of like, it's like having like a space shuttle. That's great. You have a space shuttle. You don't know how to operate or fly it. It's like, great, I got the manual, but I don't know how to do it. Right? So I know over time, he's been trying to create a more simplified, especially for startups. Startups are like, I can't do this 80 step thing. I just, so, but again, whether it's 6 or 80, it's very consistent.
I still encourage people to have a look at that, because
totally.
Some very, very good methods over there, especially if you're very methodical about this.
Yeah.
Now, one last question about the book. If you would have written it today, or if you come up with a new edition, what would you change in it, or add, or change, or nothing?
Well, I think, back to my point, I feel like there are these kind of like discoveries that certain thought leaders have made, and they're just kind of evergreen. They're kind of like, talk to customers, problem space, good UX design. The principles of good UX design haven't changed. Maybe the color palette that people like to use is different, or, metallic has gone out and now we're in skeuomorphic, whatever, all the design fads come and go. Right. So, and it is, so I wrote it to be pretty comprehensive. Sometimes when people write books like this, they don't put tools in because they know the tools are going to change over time, right? So there are some prototyping tools in there that no longer exist. It obviously was before, Figma was out and things like that. So a simple tactical thing is I would just update the resources for the tools, right? That's one thing. The one thing that I would definitely add is, again, I'm a geek, and I'm a visualization kind of person. I always wanted to create a visualization of what that opportunity score looks like, so people could get more of an intrinsic feel for it. And I just, writing a book takes a lot of work. It's self-inflicted, because it didn't have to be 340 pages, but I wanted it to be comprehensive. A few years ago, I was doing a workshop for a client, and I was like, and it kind of hit me. I'm like, I can do this visualization of it. So I went and found this equation for a 3D surface called a hyperparaboloid, and it worked out. So it's a heat map. So long story short, I have a heat map, a color-coded heat map that shows importance for satisfaction that I've mentioned in some talks, and I would include that for sure. And then, it's always, but the concepts and advice, I wouldn't change at all. Though it's always great to have case studies. Obviously, if your book's been around for 8-9 years, your case studies are older. People always, for some reason, people love, they always love the more recent case studies. Like, well, the point is to get the lesson from, some of these case studies are much better for getting the lesson, right? I do a lot of workshops and a lot of teaching. It's really hard to find, when you find a gem of a case study that you can use, and especially one that, like, when my workshops, I use one that I take through the whole lean product process, where I've got material from the company for each of those steps, and we try to recreate what they did. That, it's really hard to put something of that high quality together. The one thing I will say is also a lot of the examples in PM world, most of the examples you hear and see are B2C. And so unfortunately, enterprise and B2B doesn't get as much love. That's why a year ago, I specifically gave a talk on enterprise product management. So if I could, add in a couple of more enterprise focused case studies. The challenge there is everyone can relate to B2C because we're all consumers. If I do some case study on like wireless security, I'm going to lose like 90% of people, right? So anyway.
I see what you're saying, but I'm actually a B2B product manager in my
Me too.
Yes.
Yeah, and so Matt, so is Matt. So for us, it will be very interesting. Very.
Yeah. You gain two or something. So.
Have you seen the Enterprise Product Management talk I gave?
No, I wrote it down
You
though. I'm gonna
got
look
it.
it up.
You
I'm
got
gonna
to
look
see.
it
I'll
up.
send you the link.
Yeah.
On YouTube, there are 3 people who are like, oh my gosh, you're describing my company right now.
That's
How
it.
do you know? Like
Yep.
all these people are like, how do you know? I'm like, I've seen a lot. I've been inside. I've seen a lot of companies. Like,
Yeah, I would love to see that.
You know.
Yeah, that's excellent.
Awesome. So we cannot finish the podcast without asking you which products you like. Like if you would recommend any products, for product people, well, what would be your recommendation?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously tons of different tools. That's the exciting thing is as PM has exploded, the number of tools that product teams can use has also, and they've advanced, right? Obviously, like, I used to recommend InVision. Like in my book, the best thing you could do back then, if you wanted a clickable high fidelity prototype, was InVision, right? Your designer would give you some images, you'd upload them. The cool thing is you didn't have to be technical. You didn't have to be a designer. You just upload the images. You create little hotspot rectangles. You can string together this awesome interactive prototype, right? Yeah. Oh, now finally, and then Slack, Sketch came along, and that was the preferred creation tool over Photoshop and the other creation tools, but still it didn't have that built-in clickability prototyping. And so now Figma came along, and now it's got the ease of the designers can do what they want to do. It's got the built-in prototyping clickability stuff, right? And then you also get like the CSS stuff being specified. So Figma's great as a reason why they're dominating the market, because they solve those problems that beforehand weren't solved. The interesting thing is on the lo-fi, I'm a big fan of Balsamic, and that hasn't changed, right? That's what's funny is a lot of the hi-fi tools have changed, high fidelity, but low fidelity, Balsamic's still alive and kicking, going strong. And I love it because, good PMs fill vacuums. And so we've all been on teams where for whatever reason, we didn't have a designer. We didn't have a head count. Yep. The person was unstaffed, or we got like a quarter of a designer and that wasn't enough. And so, sometimes PMs have to jump in and do some design. I'm not saying that, I would love to have a world-class designer fully staffed so I don't have to do that. But sometimes you're not there yet. And so you have to do it. And so Balsamic's just a great way, because back to the solution space, problem space thinking, I also talk about this, a framework I've had for a long time is the way I think about UX design is like an iceberg, because there's only a little bit above the water that everybody sees, but there's a lot more going on. That part above the water is visual, and the number of executives I've taken something to, and they can only interact with the visuals, like, oh, what's this green you did? I'm like, are you serious? Do you like the layout? Did we get the right features? So the cool thing about staying lo-fi is it kind of puts blinders on. You strip away the color. It's grayscale. There's no images. It's obvious. That's what I love about Balsamic back in the day. The lines would all be squiggly. So it's subconsciously conveying, this is low fidelity. This is not done. This is not polished. Now, there's so many OCD product people that they added a wireframing mode. You turn it on, all the lines go straight if you want, right? But so that's still a great tool. And now they have a cloud tool so everybody can collaborate. They actually just put out a book called Wireframing for Everyone. I mean, they are on a mission to make, and so it's specifically for non-designers if you want to get better at wireframing. So anyway, that's one of my favorite tools that helps PMs, like even if you have a designer, you can kind of throw your thoughts together and say, here you go, Sally, just feel free to throw this out the window. I want to hear what you say, but here's just some ideas, because a lot of times executives, stakeholders, like, what are you even talking about? Like, because that's the thing. If I describe a product to you in like 2 or 3 sentences, and you're envisioning this product in your head, I guarantee what Matt's envisioning is not the same as what you're envisioning, and it's not the same as what I'm envisioning.
Yeah, but luckily for us, we covered Figma and Balsamic in previous episodes.
There you go. Go listen to those episodes.
They're the right podcast to go to.
Yep.
To listen about products, right?
So, and I'm extremely visual too, so I think that's a great point, because you can write great requirements, you can do all this stuff, but like when you put it down as a visual, it can really help a PM. It really is a skill set that a PM should
I agree. That's why I have that chat. Like literally, when I was starting PM at Intuit, I realized, oh my gosh, I don't know anything about UX design. So I went and like whatever books there were, like Inmates Are Running the Asylum was one of the first early books that was around by Alan Cooper about personas. I still have that copy from back in the 90s. And then I went and took they were like HCI classes. I went and took HCI classes and learned how to do Photoshop and stuff like that. And again, until you have to, okay, now I need to make a web page. Okay, what am I going to make the background color? What am I going to make the font?
Right.
And then you're like, oh, that looks horrible. Like, this is not, you have to, when you have to deal with it, you have to really make decisions and make the design. That's when you're like, oh, now I get it. Okay. And you start to appreciate it. So again, the goal is not for you to become the world-class designer. The goal is for you to learn enough about UX design. You can have productive conversations with your designer and with other people on the team, right? So that's the idea. And so, that's the other thing is back to that pyramid, when it comes to design, there's a fundamental difference between like interaction design and visual design. Right now, every few years, the design community likes to change their titles to keep things fresh. So now we have UX designer and UI designer, and the number of people that are confused by that is like 80+% of people in the world. Or you throw product designer in the mix. But simplistically, back in the day, we would distinguish it between visual designer, who's focused more on visual elements like color and shapes, fonts, images, things like that. An interaction designer that's focused more on the flow and the layout and the architecture, information architecture, things like that, right? The interesting thing is, I can tell right away when I work with a client or a team, and I'm like, do you have a designer? Like, oh yeah, we have a designer. Here, check out these high-res mock-ups that we did. And it's like, okay, just because you can pick the color palette and because you can, that's the only thing. That's why I love Balsamic. It only lets you go so far. It stops you. Because people can't resist. They get in there. Oh, I'm just gonna make this purple. It's like, dude, we need to figure out what's the layout, what belongs on the page and what doesn't belong on the page. Or how much room should each one take? How should they be laid out? Where should it navigate to? Before, it's like when you build a car, first thing you don't go is like, hey, what color red should we paint it? You think about, well, how fast does it have to go? How many people does it have to do? I'm not minimizing the visual design. It's very important. But some people, again, they jump to it right away.
Rush to it, right?
Yeah. And that's why balsamic makes you slow down and just like,
I have one friend actually, when she buy a car, she always asking her, which car did you buy? And she said, a blue. The blue car.
There you go.
Okay,
There's
but
always
which car is it?
There's always one.
I rented a car the other day and it was this awesome. I love the paint job. It was like this red metallic. I'm like, this is a cool color, right? But that's not why I picked the rental car. I picked it so it could fit our suitcases and our family. And anyway.
But humans tend to rush for the high fidelity. I think we had that in a conversation, Michelle.
Yeah.
I think that was like, it's just natural for humans to go, I'm just going to rush and try to make it pretty and do all the colors and
because you can.
When I learned what UX is all about, I learned it from a guy that's all he knew, and he told me, I don't know, colors is not to me. I don't know how to be pretty. I just know how to do the user experience. And I love that, to learn it from him, because I wasn't confused by, is this UI, is this UX? What is it exactly? So,
I agree. And just to be really clear, that's the thing, is the problem is, like these tools like Figma and Sketch, you could theoretically create a low fidelity prototype in there if you chose to do grayscale and you chose this, but the temptation is, and the people, I'm just going to put the color in the font and check it out. They cannot resist it, right? And just to be really clear, again, visual design is important, but as a PM, I would preferentially invest in learning the UX design, information architecture, interaction design. That's where you're going to add more value, not saying, oh, I think we should pick this other purple or this other font, sans serif,
This button isn't round enough.
Yeah, like those kind of things, right? So I think that's how you can really help, especially if your designer doesn't have that, right? That's the thing, is at the end of the day, most designers are either preferentially visual or interaction, to your point. And it's rare these days, Moshe, to find anybody that's like really geeks out on interaction design anymore, right? It's really hard to find someone who's like, no, my specialty is information architecture, interaction design, but at the end of the day, I feel like design, and you can have hybrid designers, but at the end of the day, your brain kind of tends to go one way or the other. And so if you do have a visual designer, all the more important for that PM to have those UX skills to help complement and say, yeah, but what happens when they click here? Oh, I didn't think about that,
Absolutely. Perfect. This was an amazing discussion, and I feel like I learned so much, product management just by talking with you, and I love your energy. Matt, do you have any other questions for Dan?
You mentioned analytics early on.
Yeah.
Is there like one key metric that analytics is like my jam?
Yeah.
Is there one key metric that you would recommend?
That's why I have 2 chapters on analytics in my book that was already 300 pages long, because I wanted to have soup to nuts, I drew the line at marketing because I have some stuff on like positioning and messaging. I'm like, I got to draw the line somewhere. No, none of that stuff. Yes. So specifically within the context of how do you know if your product's successful, like in the context of launching a new product or a new feature, right? Because it's funny. I'll tell you a quick story. So in our world, there are two fundamentally different types of data or evidence or research that we do. There's qualitative and there's quantitative, right? And, long time ago, to make those more memorable and interesting, I personified each of them. For qualitative, like who's the master of sitting down with someone one-on-one, looking in their eyes and getting them to open up and learning what they're all about? Oprah Winfrey, right? So that's Oprah. Qualitative is Oprah. Who's a master of kind of logic and analytics and doesn't care about any of that other stuff? Spock, right? From Star Trek. So it's Oprah versus Spock, right? Now and some people have a bias or preference, and some organizations have a bias or preference, and you can tell. But they're both valuable. And in fact, I mentioned this in my book. One of my friends who's a great UX design leader, Christian Rohr, I like to take when I see someone's other framework, I'm like, that makes complete sense. And his framework basically plots over 20 different research methodologies you could do along the scale of qualitative versus quantitative and behavioral versus attitudinal, which is another dimension. Attitudinal is like, what are people telling you? Behaviorals are what are they actually doing? And he's got color coding and symbols. I just kind of simplified it and said there's 4 quadrants. There's like qualitative, quantitative, and there's attitudinal behavior, right? But, when you imagine you're a company or a startup that's launching a new product, how do you know if you have product market fit? How do you know how you're doing with product market fit, right? And pre-launch, like when you first launch it, pre-launch, we're doing that with prototypes. I'm a big fan of let's test this before we do all the investment in building it. Like let's not put a bunch of work in, ship it, and find nobody wants what we just built. So we use prototypes. Now, once you launch, now you have analytics, right? And you can actually look. And I had a huge analytics epiphany into it. I went from working on CD-ROM software that was connected to the internet, but it was sold through retail channels, where the only feedback or data we got was how many units sold last month at Fry's or whatever, like completely inactionable to a PM. Like, we weren't tracking feature use or any of that. Then I worked on my first online product into it. And the day after we launched, like how many people signed up? Oh, okay. And there's 2 ways to sign up. Well, how many signed up versus way A versus way B? The engineer's like, let me just get the data. I'm like, every question we had within minutes, we had I'm like, oh my gosh. We have so much data to go on. So I get it. Don't get me wrong. I'm a geek. I'm a numbers guy. I'm a stats guy. I'm a math guy. I love to be, prove things beyond a shadow of a doubt, statistical significance, chi-squared, every time I could. It's just the wrong tool in some situations. So now post-launch, if you want to be like, how do I really know if I have product market fit? To answer, long story to answer your question is retention rate. It's all about retention rate, right? And the way I like to explain it, again, it makes sense to people, is 2 scenarios. Imagine we have the world's best sales and or marketing person. Any prospect comes within, comes in contact with anything that they write or see or talk to them, 100% conversion rate. And then those people go and sign up and use the product. But when they get into the product, despite the amazing sales job or marketing job, they realize this thing doesn't really solve my problems. Are they going to come back and use it despite the amazing sales job? No, they're not, right? So it's kind of a way to kind of differentiate acquisition, conversion, and retention, right? I mentioned kind of Dave McClure's startup metric for Pyros. I think it's an amazing framework because it applies to, again, when I see a framework that applies, I'll like adapt it and give those people full credit. It's great because it applies to every business. Every business has to acquire prospects. Everyone has to convert them into customers. Everyone has to, retain their users. Everyone has to generate revenue. The 5th one is referral. That's the one that your mile is, depending on what space you're in, can vary. But anyway, back to this question. What about conversely? We have the world's 2nd salesperson, right? They have like a 99.9% loss rate. They're talking to thousands of people and no one's going for it. Finally, they managed to get someone through the funnel. And that person's like, oh my gosh, I'm just doing this guy a favor because that was horrible. Let me just go check out this product. And they get in the product and they're like, this is actually pretty useful. This is actually solving my problems better than other products. Are they going to come back and use it again? Probably, right? So all you need to do is infer the macro takeaways. If somebody comes and tries your product out, and we track this with cookies and logins, right? That's how we track it, right? And we never see them again. We never see their cookie or login again. It's pretty safe to assume that whatever they saw the first time did not meet their needs, and you do not have product market fit for them. Conversely, if you see someone come in, use your product, and then a few days later, or a week later, or whatever, come in and use it again, it's pretty safe to infer that they must have got enough value the first time to come back and use it the second time. So retention is the kind of technical metric way we track that on a percentage basis, but that's the fundamental gist of how do you know if you've created enough customer value. And so when you do a retention curve, you know, it's the whole like leaky bucket cohort analysis thing, where you start out with a population of users and it starts out at 100%, and we call it day zero. So like you say, let's take everybody, since we launched one big bucket of users, and the bucket starts out at 100% day zero. And then what you do, the metaphor of the leaky bucket is you start out with your bucket 100% full. That's however many customers you started with that ever signed up during that time period, like say January. And then you just see how many show up each day, right? And it'll drop. So you can think about it as plotting the water level of the bucket. Everybody's bucket has a hole in it. Everybody has a leaky bucket. The question is, how big is the leak? And so it drops dramatically. Day one retention drops dramatically to maybe even like 30, 20, 10% or something. And then it just continues, the slope, it continues to go down to decay. And the slope, eventually kind of decreases because you go from like, infinite slope at the beginning. And then if you're at the end of the curve, after 7 days, 30 days, 60 days, one of two things happens. The curve actually goes to zero is one scenario. What does that mean? That meant that whole population of customers that you spent so much time and effort acquiring and converting, eventually all of them leaked out of the bucket and never came back to use your product.
Yeah.
And it may take 3 days, 7 days, 10 days, 30 days, but that's it, right? Conversely, you can have a situation where you have a big drop, but it levels out and it flattens out into an asymptote, a flat level. Usually when it flattens out, it's pretty low, like 2%, 5%, 10%, 15% if you're lucky. I would argue that this is my belief, if you have a retention curve that goes to zero, you do not have product market fit because people are not coming back and using it after some amount of time. Yeah. If instead you have a flattened curve, there's a percentage associated. Yeah, if it's 2% or 5%, that percentage, this is the Spock answer. That percentage is your quantitative measure of your product market fit. If you have a 0% retention, you don't have it. You have 2%, that's it. If you have 5%, you have more than 2%, right? And so what you want to do is that terminal value of retention, you want to see that increasing over time as you improve your product market fit, right?
You hone in on that 2%, that 5%.
You do, and this just falls back even before this is like good research. After you launch a product, you talk to the people that love you, like that, the high frequency users. Hey, what is it? Why are you so into me? Why are you so into my product? What is it you love?
Exactly.
But then you also need to talk to the abandoners, the people that came and left, to figure out what was it, where they just really, are we going to sharpen our target market and they just really weren't in it, or they should have been in our target market, but we were missing some key benefit or feature, are there bugs or UX? That's the thing about the pyramid, is it helps you diagnose where was the issue. Was it in the UX layer? Was it in the feature layer? Was it in the problem layer? Do we have the wrong customer? Right. So yeah, to your point, the other metaphor I like to use is fishing. Like, if I'm not a big fisherman, but if you wanted to say I wanted to catch a trout, I have to think about, well, what do trouts like to eat? And that's the bait that I would put on my hook to throw in to try to catch a trout. Well, your product is the bait on the hook. You can do all this stuff with the prototypes beforehand, and you should, to de-risk it as much as you can. But until you launch your product, you haven't actually thrown your real hook in the water. And you throw your hook in the water thinking you're going to catch a trout, but sometimes you catch, a different fish, right? Sometimes.
Well, hopefully in this metaphor, the trout is still alive and using the product.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly, right? Well, but it's funny because like drop cam, the funny thing is sometimes you throw in thinking you're going to catch a trout, and you catch a trout, but then you catch 3 other fish, and you realize, oh, wow, there's more markets here, right? So Dropcam was a famous example that I like to share. At one point on their website, again, whenever I see an example, I grab it and I put it in my slides because it's not there anymore. They got acquired by Nest. But at some point, and they didn't have this at the beginning, but at some point they must have got some really good product marketer, because they have this page where it's like use cases, and there's 4 distinct use cases. And I guarantee, I'm pretty sure the founders did not anticipate all 4 of these fish use cases. I think, they mainly did it for like security for your home. If you're not home, you can see what's going on. That I think is the baseline case, right? It's not a big stretch to, like a baby. My wife and I bought one because it was like we had our daughter and it was like a baby cam. It was way better than like the black and white grainy picture baby cam. So there's like a baby cam. Then not too dissimilar from that, pet cam. I don't have pets, but a lot of people, while they're at the office. They want to check in on
Yes.
Pookie. How's he or she doing at the, so that was a
Mhm.
use case I bet they didn't anticipate. There's obviously like business security, like shoplifting in warehouses and stuff like that, right? So anyway, there's, I don't think they anticipated all those, but they threw the hook in there. Same thing with Quicken and QuickBooks. QuickBooks emerged because we did such good market research. We just happened to ask people, hey, are you tracking your personal finances or your business finances? And surprising to everybody, we were going after the personal fish. We caught all these business fish. Like, oh, let's do QuickBooks then, right? So
yeah. Again, this was really an amazing discussion. Thank you so much, Dan, for joining us today. This is like, I can't thank you enough for being on our show and sharing with us your vast experience. Where would people be able to reach out to you if they want to learn more from you? Of course, they can buy the book. Everyone, go buy the book and read it if you didn't do it yet.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it. It's been great talking with you all about this stuff. It's a lot of fun. The book is leanproductplaybook.com. It's available hardcover, Kindle, Audible. And then also it's available in Chinese, Thai, Polish, and Turkish.
Ooh,
so it's interesting. I see there's actually a big pickup in product management activity in Poland and Thailand. I can tell because I see a lot of people. It's very,
cool.
Very interesting. So that's that. The single best place to go is my website, dan-olsen.com. It's dan-olsen. Olsen is OLSEN.com. There are links from danolsen.com to like my videos. So my YouTube channel, again, if you just go to youtube.com/danolsen, you'll see that we have 16,000 subscribers. All of my talks are there. All the meetup talks are there. It's one of the top channels, with product content. And again, the speakers that I have at the meetup are people that you would see at conferences. It's not your typical meetup. It's conference level speakers. Like Marty's been there 6 times. Tony Ulwick, who we were talking about, has been there a few times. I've had Jeffrey Moore. So I bring in people that I want to hear from too. Like Jeffrey Moore's been in there 3 times, right? Crossing the chasm. So that's the YouTube. And then also, on the website, you can see where I'm speaking. There's also links to the meetup. So Lean Product Meetup. You can Google it, or you can go to meetup.com/lean-product. It's free to join our group. As I mentioned, our events have been virtual.
We will put the link to the meetup, and then people can, I know I'm getting the notifications about the event. I subscribe to that. I've been to 1 or 2 of them in the past, I believe. And so people can subscribe and join in. And it's really great that it's remote as well, because that's what helps us learn also when we're not in the Valley. So awesome. Thank you so much, Dan, again. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for our listeners.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Moshe and Matt. Thanks a lot for having me here. It was a lot of fun.
Awesome.
Take care.
Thanks, Dan. Bye-bye.
Bye.